Today is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. I am the interviewer, Amy Moritz, with Stacey Schroeder-Watt. We are at the Grand Island Memorial Library. Stacey, a 1992 graduate of Grand Island High School, was a three-sport athlete, playing volleyball and basketball while smashing records in track and field. She won her first New York State title in the shot put in 1991 and went on to win both shot put and discus in 1992, with her discus mark of 172 feet still standing as the state record. At the University of Florida, she was named a two-time NCAA All-American in discus. Stacey went on to earn her doctorate from SUNY Upstate Medical University in Syracuse. Currently, she is the Chief of Service in the Department of Anesthesiology at Kaledia Health and is the immediate past president of the Erie County Medical Society. She's been inducted into the New York State Public High School Athletic Association Hall of Fame, the Section 6 Hall of Fame, and the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. Stacey, thanks so much for your time today.
Of course. I really enjoyed coming here and sharing the story. So again, can't be happier to be here with you today.
Well, this is great. So I'll start with a very just broad question. Tell me about a time you first remember falling in love with sports.
Well, the first time I actually fell in love with sports overall was actually when I was little. My family was very active, and whenever the family got together, it would be the grandparents, aunts and uncles, mom and dad, kids, neighbors even coming over. And anytime we could get outside and play, we would, and everyone played and got involved. So we oftentimes would have pickup softball games, or we would play, soccer, anything else would get us outside, but would also get us communicating and getting out there and laughing and having fun together, not only as a family, but really just expelling the energy and learning what it's like to compete, but also to work together as a team. So those are my fondest memories. And again, they were from the time I could walk. We were outside.
So you obviously had a family that loved being active and loved sports. What then were the organized opportunities that were available for you as a girl growing up?
Well, the first organized activities that we did were often ponytail softball. So we did in all the rec leagues. So we joined in, to learn how to play tennis, to learn how to play baseball, to learn how to play volleyball, all the learn to how-tos that were involved in the Grand Island Rec Center. And my parents believed that, you don't sit at home. It's get outside, go play, and get outside and go learn how to play correctly. So they wanted us to be involved in things that were organized so that we learned how to play the sport effectively, but we also were with other kids. And it was just a nice, again, a good experience for the community, but a good growth experience for the kids. So that I loved that we did ponytail softball. And we did it from, again, the time we could first register, we were out there and all the way through. So my mom was a Shamrock, which was one of the first semi-pro. She was a pitcher and I think first base. So again, she was really driving us forward. Obviously, you have bias when you have a favorite sport. And so she wanted us very desperately to play softball. So
now I didn't know that about, your mother and the Shamrock. So, and I've obviously heard of them. I'm going to digress a little bit. Can you did she share stories about that? Because it felt like that kind of semi-pro was such a trailblazer for women in the area.
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you, they were a very tight team. And they were out there when no one else in women's sports were out there playing beyond high school. And also to brag about my mom a little bit, she was one of the first letter winners ever in North Tonawanda history. So she was one of the people that was the first out for the team, and was the first to organize things. And it was just such a great example. But really, the Shamrocks themselves, I mean, when we were little too, she would bring us out to their practices when they were still going on. And it was inspiring to see, women athletes that you can look up to. They're older, they're established, they had other jobs, but they still came together, they still played together, and they still were competitive, and they were very good. So it did give that higher mark to strive for, to know that something better is out there, that you can continue to do sports. That was a great learning experience for me as well. To say, listen, you can do this in elementary school, you can do this in middle school, you can do this in high school, but it doesn't have to end when you enter college. It doesn't have to end when you leave college. You can do more.
what a fantastic opportunity to have that that inspiration at a time when a lot of girls didn't see other women competing at that type of level. How special that was for you.
Yeah, it was remarkable because, again, you don't have a lot of the role models, at least especially when, in growing up, there was role models in some of the business world, in other areas of life and community. But really in sports for women, it was, you had a mentor maybe in high school. And if you were lucky to play some intramurals in college, it was great. Or, maybe you could get a scholarship and that type of thing. But as I came up through the ranks, those opportunities were starting to really blossom with Title IX. So it was really becoming out there that you could get the scholarships, you can do the things beyond. But at the time, really college was a cap. So there was very few professional sports opportunities when I was coming out. You could go for the Olympics, you can go and do further things, but beyond that, there really wasn't that further traction that there is now in the community.
Obviously, you mentioned softball, a bias, and you played ponytail softball. But then when you get to high school, you're a 3-sport athlete. Not one of those was not softball, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So go ahead.
So how I found track and field was actually by accident, because we were out on the softball field, and I think I was in early middle school, and all I could think of is, I'm doing this, and I always would stay after. And my dad was a tremendous supporter of us doing sports. So, if we were out in the field, he was out in the field. And he would, be there just to sit and watch us. He loved, watching us play sports. Again, rah guy behind the scenes and just incredibly supportive. He kept every single stat, I think, for my entire career of athletics in his coat pocket. So I was out in the field, finished up to the day, was packing up everything, and I happened to look across the field. And at that time, the softball diamond was right next to the track. So I was looking by there, and I'm watching these kids in the distance throwing something. And all I could think of, and this sounds terrible, was, oh my gosh, their form is terrible. Like, what are they doing? It's not going very far. And I was intrigued. So I said, can we go check out what they're doing? And he's, being my dad, sure, let's go. We walked over there, and it was, men's and women's practicing. I had no idea who it was, but I went up and said, what are you doing? And my dad, went over and introduced us. And he introduced himself as the coach of this small team. And he said, well, we're doing something called a shot put. And, we're going to be going over and do discus in a little bit, but you have a kiddo here. And he goes, well, she's really strong. My dad was always pushing hey, she's really powerful. And the coach sort of gave like a side eye thinking, sure, she's yeah, of course she is. He goes, well, if she'd like to try it, go ahead, but don't have her hurt herself. And I go up there and I'm watching a few people throw and I'm like, still looks weird. So I pick up the shot and I'm like, well, it's heavy, but it's not terrible. It's, it's a ball. Okay. Walked up and I said, well, how exactly? I tried to mirror what they were doing. And I like in anything I do, give it all you got, see what you can do. And I put it out there and it felt like time stopped for just a second because the coach, said, stop. He goes, how old are you? And I was like, well, I think I was in 8th grade. I think I was 8th grade or 7th grade. And he said, really, how old are you exactly? And my dad looked around and he said, why? What's the problem? Is something wrong? And he goes, she just beat my college athlete. She has no idea what she's doing. He goes, I'm from a local college here. And I can tell you, holy God. He goes, she has to do this sport. He goes, come back tomorrow. We'll start work on it. And my dad thought, he goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, listen, there's certain people that can do this sport and there's certain people that can't due to size and speed and everything else. He goes, she's got the build, she's got the speed, and she's got, what it takes to do this sport. You should really look into it. And we had talked about it that evening, and the next day we came out, and from there on, it was me practicing with a local college team and a local high school track club. That's what started me off. So it was sort of, I backed into the sport accidentally.
Did you like it immediately?
I loved being able to use my strength. Because to be honest, a lot of the women's sports don't use strength. They'll use speed, they'll use agility, they'll use a lot of things, or they'll use power, which is, just basically fast, strength. But this gave me the opportunity to really push myself in the ways that I actually excelled, which was with power. So I loved it from the start because I could use the gift I had. And I hate to say it, I was good at it when I first started. I'm like, it was something that I could be like, wow, I'm good at this. Now, to be honest, you don't make a ton of friends being a shot put and discus thrower. Let's be clear. So oftentimes, like the track meets would be going off, and there'd be people cheering in the stands, and off in the distance we'd be throwing shot and discus, and and I'd come back, and if I won, and everyone would be like, "Oh, that's great, you got points for the team." But after a while, they started to recognize that, I might be doing something that's pretty neat. So then I started grabbing, a few people would come over and just check it out. Then all of a sudden, like, well, she's still winning. We should go over and actually see what she's doing. This looks interesting. So it did gain a little momentum, but I can tell you when I first started, again, it's not one of the glamour events of track and field or anywhere else. You get dirty, you're pushing this hard, like, ball through the air or the discus, and it looks like a grunt event. And let me tell you, but it is a fantastic sport. And I try to tell, especially women, because they have then this visualization of shot put and discus throwers, their knuckles dragging on the floor, and that they're powerful and not very, they're, how do I put it nicely? They're not very pretty, that type of thing. But I tried to break that stereotype, because if you look at even Altman, which is the number one discus thrower in the United States and beyond, she is a dancer. She is a beautiful woman that is actually really excelling in the sport. And so I try to draw their attention, like, you don't have to be the image that you don't want. You can be a beautiful, fantastic athlete and excel in any sport. It just is all out there and available to you now.
That's great. There's so much there that I want to unpack a little bit. I want to ask you first, I want to kind of go back to, so you played volleyball and basketball as well. So how did those sports, obviously they're different because you're more with a team, right? There's more of that. You obviously are playing with the team as opposed to getting points for the team in track and field. But so how, I guess, describe those experiences and how did those sports at all help you as you were then preparing for a shot and discus?
Oh, absolutely. And I enjoyed them so much. So I got into volleyball because, my family signed us up for everything. And those other sports was everything. Volleyball and basketball was included. And it also gave me an opportunity to play with my sister. My sister was a very good volleyball player and basketball athlete. And it was nice having us together on the same team. She was a year in front of me. And it was an opportunity to play, to get to know people. It was community. And jumping, being able to quick turnarounds and everything else really did impact my ability to throw the shot and discus, and also carrying it through. So you don't have an off season where all of a sudden you're just sort of lulling and you then have to hurry up and try to, train and get back into conditioning for your next sport. Having the three sports enabled me to not only stay in shape and in training, but also really develop those community and friendships that only sports, I think, can provide, which is a different kind of friendship. Friendships, oftentimes, you say each other hi in the hallway, you're in the same class together, but when you're out there struggling in the field and you're passing back and forth and you have to have a level of trust, when you pass someone the ball, you push the ball to someone for them to spike it, or you set them up, or you're trusting someone to make that serve or that free throw, that's a different level of trust. You're putting the game and your faith in that person. And that is something that you can only learn in the field. Because in a social arena or even in school, you take the test. You do it. You show up to class. You say hi to the answers. You do everything yourself. It's very isolating, even though there is community and you meet each other in the hallway. But when you're on the athletic field, the trust you must have in one another, and the trust has to return back to you. They have to be willing to pass you the ball. They have to believe that you're going to make the free throw. They're going to have to believe that you're going to spike it in bounds and that you're going to be there for them and their team in a bigger and greater way. So learning that and having that carry through is also another amazing part of sports.
So now when you go to track and field, it's a whole different animal, right? And I find track and field teams fascinating because as someone who's more of a distance runner, the sprinters, that's a whole different breed than a distance runner from the field events. And I'm sure that even in the field events, the jumpers and the throwers, like there's, it's a team, but it's individual. So what was that dynamic like?
It was very unique in that I could also excel and be powerful on my own, but still be a part of something greater. And that is like the really true, wonderful thing about track and field is you can go out, excel, do well, get recognized by your own merit, yet be part of a community and part of a team. And I also was in the 4x1 relays. So let me tell you, there is nothing greater than passing that baton off and having the absolute certainty of they're going to get it and continue running. But again, track and field is incredibly unique in that way. But I also loved it because the popularity contest was out of it. And being myself like an introverted sort of on the shyer end of a person, it sometimes was tough with team sports and everything. I wasn't going to be the one saying, ooh, pass me the ball and waving my hands wildly and running out. It's not my style. I'll be there. I'm sort of on the stoic end of things. And, I will be your solid. I'll be your rock. I will be there for you. But if you expect me to be loud and to be, out there and again, waving crazily, I'm not that person. But also I'm not going, especially in high school, I wasn't going to be promoting myself or like, ooh, pick me and I want to be this and I want to do that. But in track and field, you're recognized by the distance. There's no favoritism. There's no, nepotism. There's nothing. You throw a distance and that's it. It went that certain distance and it was in bounds. Great. So that's also why I liked it, is because I could be my same introverted self that was of powerful nature. And I could rely on that to speak for me sometimes when I wanted to be quiet or I wanted to be, stoic. And that was very comforting for me, but it allowed me to excel, but it also allows me to use my strengths to be recognized.
Now, were you also practicing with the boys at the same time? Were you guys all together? And what was that dynamic like?
Oh, that was fun. So, track and field is also great in that, especially with the throws events, boys and girls, men's and women's practice together. And it was nice having that camaraderie beyond the women's event because, again, when I was throwing, there wasn't many women throwing. And those that did sometimes would throw the ball twice and then run away and hide under the bleachers or run and do something else, where I was actually practicing. And not all the time, but, for the most part, most of the women that were doing that were doing it also, or they were forced. But having the men's team there, and they were incredibly supportive. A lot of the guys they found it fascinating that I could throw as far as them. But it was also a great thing to strive to, because especially if you're competing with fellow girls and women and you find yourself maybe out competing, you always want to have someone in front of you. So it was nice having the guys out there that could, distance-wise outthrow me, because I was incredibly motivated then to go after their numbers. And especially as I aged, I started beating all the guys too, which, was good for them and good for me, because then we really got into it and started competing in a good way, not into it in a bad way. But we were good in that we were teammates, and it was nice having the guys there, because they also sort of blocked for me a little bit. When some of the girls would come over or make a comment, or even the guys would come over and be like, oh yeah, it's just shot and discus. They'd be like, hey, you try it. I want to see you throw the ball as far as she can, or, you do what she does. Let's see you give it a go, and I'll bet you money you can't. So we had our own community within the track team, which was absolutely fantastic.
That's, I love how you said like that. Also, like, it helps you get better and then you help them get better. It's that, kind of that back and forth.
Absolutely.
I mean, talk about getting better too. Then you talk about your junior and senior year in high school. Yeah. You always, from that first day you picked up the shot, right? You're like, I think I could be good at this. So can you tell me about the state championship, and then what's happening then when you're a junior and senior?
So as I developed and started getting better and getting stronger, number one, you get a target on your back a little bit. So every time you go to a competition, and I never, I would wear, a hoodie over top some things. I didn't want to be like the one sticking out. So I would, go in the back and just, sit calmly by myself. And I didn't make a big scene of anything. So, because I didn't want like people, coming around and trying to do silly things. So I was again very on a very quiet, reserved nature. Even though in the shot put and discus ring I was very explosive in nature, but I really kept to myself outside that. But as in junior and senior years, as I got better, I noticed a lot more people coming to see me, which was really nice but scary. When you're in high school, you're not used to anyone showing up and in that realm of just there to see you. And my dad, though, loved it because he would stand at the corner, and he even got a T-shirt, I think, once that said, like, I'm Stacey Schroeder's dad. I was like, please put that away. But he loved it because he would go out and they would ask, which one is Stacey? And he'd go, that's my daughter over there. She's the one sitting in the corner trying to avoid everyone. But it was great in seeing that. And as I became better, more people started showing up. And I think it was good for the sport, too, because a lot of people didn't recognize it, especially in the women's arena. It was always considered a men's sport, a power sport. And again, the years ago, that wasn't a really great thing to have like it is now. And I am so happy we have the rugby players, the professional women basketball athletes that are driving forth it's okay to be competitive. It's okay to be strong. It's okay to be better. It's okay to shine. And you should be proud of that and embrace it. But at the time when I was coming through, it wasn't really that way. So I am so happy that things have changed in that way. But even in my senior year, I still remember this, and I'll share this story with you because I thought it was very funny. Right before one of our last senior games, one of our cheerleading athletes had asked if she could bring over the cheerleading unit to cheer for me while I threw. Because they knew the news media would be there. And I said, absolutely not. Because number one, when you're throwing, and I was trying to explain it to her, it's supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to be very quiet. And it's also very distracting if I have like people jumping up and down or pom-poms flying. I said, because I'm watching the horizon line when I'm throwing, and if you're jumping around or doing something, I could be thrown off in a big way. She goes, well, we'll keep it down, but we just want to make sure we're rooting you on. And I, politely said, I just don't think it's a good idea. But also the other part of me is like, where have you been? Like I've been throwing here for a while and I've done well. And now suddenly the news media is out there. And now you want to suddenly I'm good to support. Where before these same individuals were the ones who were sort of not making fun of me, but not exactly being supportive.
Was it difficult? I think it's always difficult in high school because there's a lot going on when you're in high school, right? Like just a whole lot that has nothing to do with anything but being a teenager and being in high school. But being someone that maybe was a little bit more on the shyer side and then getting attention, how difficult was that for you? Or was it difficult for you?
It was difficult. It was very difficult to suddenly have the spotlight where you're very comfortable being good but not being out there. And as you become, more recognized and you start breaking records and you're doing these things, all of a sudden you're no longer in the shadows. You're getting pulled out of that. And for someone who's in high school and quite shy and very self-conscious, because again, they sometimes the uniforms are a little like, especially for a woman who's like a little bit in a stronger area, it's not exactly flattering sometimes. So it was difficult. It was difficult to get pushed out of that comfort zone. It was great. And I look back at it now, of course, and think, wow, that was a great experience. They really drew me out. It got me to be comfortable with speaking. It got me to be comfortable with, my physique and who I am and being this person. It got me into, being recognized for colleges. But at the time, I can tell you, it was not a favorite of mine to be all of a sudden, pictures flashing and people talking to me and all the time. And I learned fast and I grew quickly, which I think was a great thing, but also a very scary thing when you're in high school.
Sure. Were there people that helped you with that?
Yeah, I had two really great people in my life that really sort of helped me maneuver a lot of these things. And like, beside my parents, who were incredibly supportive, but, when you're in high school, sometimes mom and dad, they do know a lot, but you think they don't know a lot. So I actually had a English teacher named Miss Droit, who not only helped me with all my college essays, but, would help me with speaking. And she would just go through, okay, when you're interviewing and you're doing these questions, let's go through a few. Because I think she started to recognize that I was getting, asked repeatedly to answer these things. And she wanted me to help sound more polished. And I agreed. So we would work on it. And then the second person is actually the football coach, Gene Masters. He was really a proponent of women's of athletics, and he was the one who also just drove forward. Like, he never was on any of the teams like that I was on. He never coached anything, but sometimes being a mentor and being there for someone is being there and just talking it through. He'd ask me how I was doing. He'd ask me, what colleges I'm looking for and why. And, when people started making comments or picking on me, he would make it known, like, it's not okay. And, that this should be celebrated. This is something that is really great. And he was right there with me and with Miss Droit, trying to, make sure that I was doing well and doing okay, that I had the support I needed from the school, and that those accomplishments were also recognized. And I can't stress that enough, because oftentimes, especially when it was early on, when I'd win something, crickets, like nothing happened. And I always wondered, like, well, how come, like, I just won this invitational and it's not on the morning announcements, it's not anywhere else, and how come, the other teams are getting so much recognition and I'm not getting any. And it was a little bit of paranoia, but also I was like, it was comfortable in a way that, you don't have to worry about it. But as I became better, and I'm like, wait a minute, why am I not, getting on the announcements? And it never hit me harder when one day I won the indoor nationals, and it was like for the United States indoor high school team. And I thought to myself, wow, I dressed up that day. I thought, wow, this is going to be on the announcements. I was super excited. People were going to get to know that I did this really great thing. And, they're going to see me in this way. And I waited, and the announcements went off, and, they announced all the other team sports that didn't win any championships, that didn't, do what I've done. And they all got applause and nothing. And it was a side note. I think someone like skidded through at the end of it. Oh yeah, and there was a track and field event, everyone did well. And I was the funny part is I was the only one there from the Grand Island High School. And all I could think of is like, I went home and I was hurt. I was really hurt, because I thought this was my moment and everything. And my dad put it in really good perspective. He said, if they can't see you, that's their problem. He goes, the world sees you. And he goes, and they can see what you're doing and how good you're doing and all the wonderful things you're going to become. He goes, if they're that short-sighted or nearsighted, he goes, that's not on you, because it's on them. And he goes, but I talked to Miss Droit and Masters about that. And they did, to Grand Island's credit, like I think the next day it was on the announcements. So they did make that up, but it was just the time too. So they did try to be fair, but I think sometimes in that moment, they were celebrating the football team, they were celebrating the basketball team, and it was the guys' teams. So again, different time, but I'm glad those times are over.
Yes. Well, the University of Florida saw you, and some other colleges saw you as well. Take me through a little bit of that college process, and was there recruiting? I mean, what was that like in the early 90s then? Oh,
it was, I never had anyone that I knew also that had gone through it. So it was surprising when the first letter showed up. And I remember I got the letter and I thought, oh, what is this from? Like, I'm only, I think it was a junior, so early junior. And I opened it up and I'm like, oh, it's a college recruitment letter. So I showed my dad and he goes, wow, this is like really good. Like, because we didn't come from a ton of anything. So, he's like, you could actually get a scholarship in this. He goes, oh, so he was all looking into this one college, and the next day more letters came. The next day, different letters came. So my dad was so funny. He got so excited. he started a filing like area and by state. And he was like, he put the little letters in and he would be like, okay, what do we have from this one? So it was great. And it was really astounding how many schools thought they saw me. They saw me, and they saw me not only as an athlete, but a student athlete, because I was good in both, not that I would get a dual scholarship. They wanted me for full on sports, but they knew I could make the marks. And that was evident in a lot of their letters. They're like, you're a powerhouse on and off the field. We're not going to offer you a combined athletic academic. You make it all on your own on athletics. So we're going to give you a full athletic ride. And it wasn't one or two schools. I think we had upwards of 20 schools that offered for me to come and join them, which was great to have. And going on college visits, oh my gosh, when you're in high school and you're not used to any of that stuff, and all of a sudden the plane tickets and everything else start showing up, it was a time in my life that I'll never forget, and I'm truly thankful that I went through that, because you do feel the value. You feel that people like see you and want you on their team. I'd meet all these great people, and I wanted to be on every single team I met. So I thought, oh my gosh, these are wonderful people, and they see me, and they want me to be here. And every college I looked at was better than the next, and I loved them all. So it was a very tough decision.
Tough decision, but also it sounds very validating for you after some of your experience, knowing your worth, but feeling like you weren't maybe necessarily being valued by some people, but not everybody around you in high school.
That's very true. And it just put a point on it, like all those, but it also validated all the work I did. When other kids were going out and, doing parties and not practicing and skipping out and doing stuff, I was the one showing up for not only the Grand Island practices, but then my dad would drive me over to Sweet Home, and I would have a second practice. And then on the weekends, we'd go out in the field and throw. And then I, started lifting. So the investment had paid off. And it was paying off in a way that I didn't even anticipate how well it, like, this was amazing. Like, otherwise I'd be going to, a local college, and my sister, we'd have to get jobs. And it was just like the stress of that potential, and knowing that it could be taken away in that way because of all those extra practices. There was almost like pennies in a piggy bank, in an investment in myself. And, my dad's investment to hold that, is a special place. It was a special relationship between him and I, but also me and my mom too. I mean, they were both very big in athletics, but they supported me in a way that I don't think sometimes families get rushed, and they put athletics on the backfield, and they think, oh, it's just something, extra that just takes up time. And I love to break that when I see it, and people like, it's so much more than that. But having those pennies in the piggy bank and seeing that investment and getting validated for being like the number one in the nation, that was huge.
What was that? I mean, you can't speak for your mother, but I'm wondering your mother's knowing her background and knowing what she did as much as she could that was available to her, then to see where you were able then to take it. What do you remember about her response and her reaction to all of your success there?
I remember she loved going to the tournaments and everything that we did, and she was like the first to be like, tell everybody, just like my dad, like, that's my kid. But she also would tell the story of like, I tried to get her into softball, but I'm sort of happy she didn't. And I was like, so, it was a mom's pride, but, and it didn't matter to her what sport I did, but it did matter that we did a sport, and that we competed and we pushed and that type of thing. And again, it all started in the backyard of the house.
And ends up at Florida. So tell me about your decision and what made you decide to go to Florida.
So during the recruitment visit, when I went down there and traveled, you've never been to a big campus before. I mean, high school's a lot different when you go onto a huge college campus and it's bright lights and spectacles. And I remember when I went on the recruitment visit, and not that this swayed me in any way, but it did impress me in a big way. They took us into the Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, and they took us up to the press boxes, and they were showing us around. And then they had like a light snack there. And then, I was the athlete that was there that day. And all of a sudden the stadium lights went on and the scoreboard went on and it was video. And it was a video welcoming me to the University of Florida for my recruitment visit. And for a kid that was coming from Grand Island and who was sort of never seen in that big of a way, to have that happen, that made an imprint on me that they put that together. That was orchestrated just for me to do that. And then the whole rest of the recruitment visit, they knew I wanted to be in the sciences or potentially engineering at that time. So they spent a lot of time, to show me the athletics and the academics together were both there, because I was like nervous because everyone always told me when I was in, school, the northern schools are really great and they're, really academic, and the southern school is not as good. And as the more I looked into it, I said, wait a minute, that's not true. And they also put such a high value on it. They took me into the study hall. It was an athletic study hall, and I've never seen anything like it because it was packed. It had all, at that time, like not everyone had a computer at that time. So it was like full of computers. Everyone was there, and they had like a tutoring schedule on the board so you can get tutors whenever you wanted and all these things and support. And all I could think of is, this is great. Like, I won't have to worry as much about like doing everything because I got this team behind me. And other schools had people and were supportive and everything else, but this had a very unique structure that was like, no, we're going to make sure you succeed like in everything because we're going to be there. And it was really felt like they had everything really worked out at that place. So that's why I picked it, was because they did have a great science program, but this is the support of the school. And it was just, everyone worked around the athletic department, and they took me through the locker rooms too. And they showed like every athlete, every female athlete, every male athlete, all had their own locker, all had their own things. And it was like equal support, even though the football team brought in a lot of support, it was shared. So it wasn't like you were treated less. And I did feel that at some of the other places that I had visited. It was like, oh, here's the men's locker room. And it was like, huge and bright and shiny. And then they took you to where your locker room was, which was down the hall in the back, and, the light bulbs flickering and the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, no. But seeing the equality that was really center stage there was really nice. And again, it made an imprint and a factor in my decision.
So take me just a little bit through your time, at Florida and what that experience was like for you athletically.
Athletically, it was second to none in that you're doing it year round. So I came from pushing myself to do it most of the year, but doing other sports too, to that was my center focus. And I also never had the ability or resources to have a nutritionist, to have a weight trainer, to have a plyometrics trainer, to have a massage therapist, and then you had all these support people that you never had before. And it was so amazing how they worked together, and your performance grew from that. And it was all you. Like, you went and did all these things because you had this great team behind you. And it made sure you were well, and it checked in on you and everything else. But as I went through, and again, you do indoor and outdoor, and I never had an indoor season when I was in school. They have indoor now, but when I was in high school, that wasn't an option. And doing all this indoor, outdoor season back and forth and training year round, it was great. My freshman, sophomore year, I found that I was excelling quite, doing very well in the sports and really loving my time in Florida. Again, being warm, also I could throw year round outside, and that was a huge benefit to me. And then after, I think my junior year, I ended up in the Sea Rays relays. I'll never forget. I ended up throwing, I was in the discus event, and my foot got caught underneath the discus ring, and it had a small lip on it, and I ended up snapping over top of it. And I remember the instant pain because I ended up, tearing my hamstring, and saved the throw and got out of there. But it did end up impacting the rest of my career in the throws events. I could still throw, but it was just the power. It took a long time for rehab to really resurface that injury.
Mm-hmm. How difficult was that for you? At some point, every athlete has something that kind of an injury, or then they end up kind of stall, whatever. So how was that I'm assuming that was pretty challenging to deal with.
It was, especially for someone who hasn't been injured to that magnitude in history. So everyone had, you turn your ankle, you twist your knee, you tweak your elbow. Those things happen and you get through them and it's fine. But when you almost completely tear through your hamstring and you're having all these pains and issues, that became difficult and different because it now was a substantial injury that took me out of something that I enjoyed doing. And it required now rehab. So I never had to do, testing and scans and rehab. And, would this be a surgical candidate thing? Would it be not? Would I do therapy? And it also plays with your mind a bit because before you're used to being on this competitive edge and everything's working great and you're throwing and things are going well. And all of a sudden this sets you back in your mind and also physically. And it's tough to come back from that because, again, you also sometimes, worry, will your hamstring give out again? Mm-hmm. Because there wasn't a surgical option. It just didn't care completely. I did a lot of work on it, but then you always in the back of your mind think, is it going to give this time? And I, worked with a lot of people and I did complete my career and very happy to be there, but it did set me back in a way that I think a lot of athletes that do have injuries of large magnitude, whether it be from, surgeries, breaks, everything else, it does take a great amount of, mental, physical effort to get through those things.
Mm-hmm. While you were at Florida, so you mentioned going to Florida, sciences were always, that was your jam there. Was there a point when you decided that medical school like that was where you wanted to go? Did that happen in Florida?
It did. It happened in my sophomore year, and sometimes the greatest things in our lives happen because we get a positive outcome. We have a positive mentor. Something great happens to us, and the lights shine and confetti sprays, and it just shows us the way of this is the wonderful thing for you. And sometimes though it happens in a reverse way. It happens because something bad happens or something negative you experience, and you learn such thing for that, you drive forward. And that's sort of what happened to me in finding medicine. While I was in college, my grandfather became ill he had actually 2 cancers at the same time. He had leukemia and colon cancer, and he ended up being very sick very quickly. So him and I had been very close. I was very close to my grandparents. And, when he fell ill, I, came home and every chance I could to come see him. And he got, again, declined very quickly. And I do remember in the hospital one day, he was, in bed, local hospital here, and sitting in the corner reading a book, but it was sort of tucked in the side. And, physician rolls in, rips the covers off, and not even a hi, say, hey, nothing. Startled him. And before I could say anything, he started pushing on his stomach, which was very sensitive at that time because he had just undergone surgery and he was, not doing well, and he had obstruction. And he said, well, everything looks fine, and he left the room. Didn't bother to cover my grandfather back up, didn't ask him how he was doing. Like, there was just such of a lack. And I just say a lack of care, a lack of communication, a lack of trust, a lack of professionalism, just a lack. And I just remember I walked over and I got him settled again. And I said, you okay? And, he's like, I'm fine. He goes, he's a jerk. And I was like, okay, we can agree on that. And he said, you could do that a lot better. And I said, well, what do you come on, Grandpa. And he goes, no. He goes, you're all sciencey and you're real smart. He goes, why can't you do that? You could be so much better at doing, the medicine stuff, the doctor stuff. He goes, you could change, people's lives for the better because you care, you're smart. He goes, and, you have what it takes. You could do this. And I was like, I blew it off. I was like, pain meds, it got to be something talking here, but it stayed with me and it kept playing in the back of my head. And I'm like, well, let me look into it. I'll just, I'll take a look at it, but I'm sure it's nothing. So I went in and I was looking at what it would take to be in med school and everything else. And I thought, well, I do have the grades. I'm like, it's a long time though in school. And I was weighing things out and I said, well, with anything, I want to see what it's like. So I shadowed a few physicians just to get a feel for what it would be like, and asked a lot of questions. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized it actually was a very good fit, especially the operating room for me, because that was the most athletic area in the entire hospital, if you will. It is a very big locker room mentality, and it really comes forward. And people come from, anesthesia and surgery and nursing and respiratory therapy and, in all sorts. They all come together. They all do their part, and they work toward a common goal. Sound familiar? It sounds just like a track team where they're not, all interchanging. Like, I'm not high-fiving the surgeon during the procedure, but we are working together, whether it be for gaining points or whether it be for keeping the patient stable. We have to work together to make sure the patient's okay. And, my team changes daily. So I could be working with one team in the morning and one team in the evening. And just like in shot put and discus and being part of track and field, your teams change throughout. So you might have the same team, but, at offer times in a relay, I might be with someone else. But the game doesn't change. You're still going for the best effort. And whether it be for winning a victory on the field or whether it be for a patient, arriving safely in recovery room, it's similar in so many ways.
One of those other, so many examples that we have, but the example that you have in your life of where sport, that experience in sport almost directly leads to or impacts your life after sport.
Yeah. The connection is incredibly strong, and it just one thing leads into another. And especially if you learn a lot about yourself in athletics. You learn, your strengths, your weaknesses, how you interact best with people. You learn about yourself, and that carries beyond the field. It carries into how you'll do in college. It'll carry into how you'll do that job interview. It'll carry into how you perform at work. And if you want a leadership role, many of the individuals that I work with in leadership roles in administration do have an athletic bent or a background to them. And we oftentimes will even find ourselves talking about our histories and background, because I find more than not, if you ask a lot of people in those again, higher ranking areas, they've learned so much from athletics. It's helped them to drive forward and rise to the top.
I wanted to ask you about female throwers in Western New York, because we've had quite a few come through here or from here and be pretty successful. I guess I don't want to say what's in the water here, but what have you seen perceptions change? Does one person's success, does your success help someone else see that? How do you see that have progressed?
Well, I think, I'd love to say that I was the one that sort of, started to break the dam open a little bit. Maybe I was, but I could tell you, I think there's been a lot of good coaches in this area. Sweet Home, I think Dunkirk, there's Grand Island had many good coaches too. There's been an underlying strength in our coaching that have really brought athletes up. If you don't have the coaching there and you don't have someone sort of guiding the way and mentoring and showing how to do it, you could have the best athlete in the world. They're just not going to reach that higher level of the potential if someone's not there to carry them up. I've been in coaching here in the area too, trying to help other, women get those scholarships, rise to the top, and really learn about themselves along the way in this wonderful thing called athletics. So I think by giving back, you get a lot more out of it. But I think that's why that we have a lot of great throwers here in Western New York, is because also those great throwers come back. They might have a family there, but they come back and then they coach a little bit on the side and they find it, they love it, and then they stay and coach more, and then there's a mentorship that goes through it. So I think if anything has to really do with the success of the throwers here in Western New York, I think it has to do with the people that care a lot about them, which are the coaches and the mentors.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask you what Title IX means to you.
It means a lot. It means a lot because it has to go back to those Florida days with the equity factor of knowing that I had a scholarship. And it might not be, because track and field was not exactly going to pack the stadium, let's be honest. But because the football team packed the stadium, that allowed, equivalence in support for other women's sports to succeed. Because without that support, there won't be the scholarships out there. There won't be an opportunity for me to get a scholarship and excel and prove my, prowess on the field and do all those great things. It opens the door. And also shows that all those investments in myself have value. I can work hard and excel and be the number one in the nation, and I can get a scholarship. Where if Title IX doesn't exist, because I don't pack the stadium and I don't get all those, those financial rewards and everything, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get the scholarship. I won't go to college, potentially. And that's, for me, that's everything. And it shows that you work hard. It's the American dream. You work hard. You put in the time, the effort, the energy. You have the physical ability, mental toughness. You've done the work. You can get the scholarship. You can be supported. It's there for you. You take that away, and what are you saying to all the women athletes out there that are busting it on the field? That you can work really hard and be outstanding, but it doesn't carry the same value. That's a terrible message. Granted, now we have women, NBA players that are making very good bank and really showing what women can do. But in the regular college arenas, we need to protect, women's sports. We need to make sure that they survive and that other women athletes have the opportunity to compete, to earn scholarships, to get out on the field. It's a demonstration of value and equality in sports that is something that I think should never be tarnished.
Is that something that you would want younger generations or the younger generation to know? Because even though you had that opportunity, it still was new in that time. It was something that still, even though Title IX had been around for a while, it still was new. So it's what they've always known, but it hasn't always been that way.
Right. And I think, if you don't remember what it was like or you hear about it, you're doomed to go down that path. And everyone thinks, well, I don't know how many teachers even were like, well, it should be only academic scholarships for women. I've heard that when I was in applying for colleges too. So we have to remember where we came from. I mean, Title IX was established for purpose, and that was to give women's sports an opportunity to flourish and thrive so that women could get out there and play. And we should never forget that, of the sacrifices that the past has made to make sure the opportunities now exist, for us to grow, thrive, and succeed in these wonderful areas. So, always look back, because there's some incredibly valuable lessons and some amazing people that have blazed the way. Without other people that have set up Title IX and who really were forerunners in sports, I wouldn't have gotten a scholarship. I wouldn't have become, I wouldn't have gotten to Florida, probably wouldn't have found medicine. I know I wouldn't have been able to afford a lot of those things. I wouldn't be here now in this position that I'm at. It all has a role and it has an impact. And you might not see it right away, but you'd be taking away that opportunity for so many women out there. And that would be an absolute disaster and just incomprehensible.
Yeah. Last question for you is, what is a favorite, one or two, memories that you have from competing?
Oh, let's see. The first I have is when I actually broke the state record. And it was sort of cold, remember, and we were in an invitational, and I just remember, it was a slightly windy day, and I thought to myself, I'm going to have to slow down a little bit. I'm going to have to really focus on my form. And all these things were blurring in my head, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to throw. And it was just that moment of clarity. And if you've ever done something and everything feels right, it's called, like, oftentimes people will call it flow, people will call it in the zone, all these type of things. All I know is when I was throwing, it felt effortless, and the pull felt great. And then when I saw the discus fly, I just had this like great feeling, and it kept going. And all I could think of is, that was a really good throw. And I, walked out the back, and I just remember my coach was over jumping up and down, and my mom was screaming, and I was like, you can't see when you're in the back how far it went or anything else. And everyone was like going crazy, and I couldn't figure out why. I was like, it's a good throw, but I didn't think it was, like to that level. Then they were bringing out tapes and everything, and it was just having everyone cheer for you is something that you don't forget. That power of the moment. You feel like, oh my God, these people are cheering for me, like, oh my gosh, they're saying my name, and it's something that stays there in your heart. And it gives you that power, that feeling of validation of just, just your heart swells. So that was one tremendous day of an impact. And the second day I remember it was the indoor nationals, and it was my senior year, and I wasn't feeling well. And I remember I had a cold, and I just was sort of miserable, and I was just like, oh, this is not going well. And it came down to the last throw. I was behind, and I just, again, it just, things weren't going right. And it was just a struggle. And I just, my coach called me over, and it was Coach Wyatt from Sweet Home. It was with me that day, and Coach Garnham. And they were saying, like, what's going on? Like, you have like 2 throws left. And then it was all of a sudden 1 throw left. And he goes, I know you don't feel good. He goes, you could see it in your face. You're sick, you're ill, you're whatever. He goes, but for the, pull it together. And I was just like, and it hit me like a load of bricks. Like, wait a minute. Like, what am I doing? Like, I don't feel right, but am I really giving this, everything I have, or what's going on in my head? And it was a moment of like sort of slap in the face clarity of like, come on, like you can do this. So I got in the ring, and I remember right before I threw, I just thought, if this is it, if this is my last throw, I do really have to get behind it and do everything I can, because everyone had already written me off. They knew I feel like, you could see everyone. The woman who thought she won was already like, acting the part in the corner and that type of thing. And so I got in there, and I just was like, not today, I'm going to do this. And I threw, and I actually ended up winning the competition, for the second year in a row. And I remember it felt good because it was a come from behind. No one expected me to pull it out. And it proved to myself I could, even when I wasn't feeling well, I could still shine. But also, all the people that were just counted me out, you're wrong. Don't ever count me out. I can come from behind. I can make that impact. I can do the throw. And it was great to believe in yourself in that way. And it was a really striking moment.
Well, Stacey, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your stories.
Thank you. I've had a great time. I have an absolute wonderful time. And I encourage any woman athlete out there, whether you're in, middle school, high school, college, or even, you're doing something, find other like minds, find a mentor. We're out there, and you'd be surprised if you just reach out, how many people will be reaching back to you. So go find your people, go find your tribe, and do well.
I love that. Thank you.